And we are back. Straight shooting, straight shooting. Big thanks to my team, by the way. I rarely get to say a big thanks to Izo, my producer, Big Sean, my assistant executive producer, for the good work we're doing. We have a lot of things to discuss, but, topically, that is, we have to take a small interruption on topical issues to talk about what's been happening currently in Kenya, because Kenya's been gripped by a bit of madness. And unfortunately, where there's madness, there's going to be the name Raila Odinga there. So today we'll talk about something called Mandamano ya Fujo. I think it was not Aristotle, but one of the Greek philosophers that said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Raila has been on the streets in agitation, in political detention, in post-election violence, in electoral injustice type stuff for the last 40 years. So it behooves our investigating and interrogating how we are in 2023, 7 months after elections. We're back to square one. This is serious stuff. It only, by the way, I really take great exception to these demonstrations for the simple fact that the economy is feeble. The economy was already bad, and then the economy got whacked, almost knocked out by COVID-19. Unlike many sophisticated countries, we didn't have deliberate, proper, structured interventions during the lockdowns, during the curfews. Families were staying home for days and weeks on end. We had a huge disruption, of course, of food distribution, etc. So families were pretty much staying home. You can imagine in the slums, the vijijis, just going hungry. And we lost a lot of jobs. A lot of jobs were lost with COVID. None other than the Intercontinental Hotel closed. So hotels and restaurant establishments, because you couldn't eat out, they have a big chunk of unskilled labor. The guards, the waitresses, waiters, bartenders, chefs, cooks, servers. I mean, that whole chunk of the working force, those guys stayed home, no income, no work, therefore no income. A lot of this cadre of workers also go day by day. So if you don't work for a week, you're in serious problems. And many didn't work for 6 months or a year. This is on top of us already having a weak economy. And so the economy is just now starting to come back struggling. And then now we come and do demonstrations. It's almost inhuman. So we have to go to the cause, what we call the cause and effect analysis. Raila is poor on strategy, contrary to myth. Because as with religion and some of politics and a lot of these controversial things with human beings, people want something to believe in. People want something to hold on to aspire to. So Raila's supporters are united in grief and fury. It's an emotional connection. So they have a picture in their mind that is a false picture, that is a hyped picture. Yakom, Yaturwa, whatever these things they call, Baba, etc. But the evidence shows the contrary. Raila is poor on strategy. You cannot have the kind of following that this man has, and you are now in the 25th year of this cycle of, since 1997, of something has gone wrong with the Electoral Commission, and I was supposed to be pronounced president and I haven't. It's extremely embarrassing. It is extremely disturbing. And now you are threatening yet again to bring down a whole country for your political ambition. And you're knocking, 80 is knocking at the door, if you're not already 80 years old. We must say here on this show, because this is straight shooting. Raila's days are behind, best days are behind him. His best days are behind him. His season is over. His time is not now, is not the future. Raila's time is the past. In fact, I dare say, Raila could have been, or would be, a retired president. Uhuru Kenyatta, who's much younger, is a retired president. Raila had a huge conflict with President Mwai Kibaki that saw him end up as prime minister. This was years ago. This was like 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago. It's absurd that Raila has had the same conflict with Kibaki's successor, Uhuru Kenyatta, the fourth president. And amazingly, Raila is having the same conflict now with Uhuru's successor, William Ruto, the fifth president, a man young enough to be his son. Something must give. Something is wrong with this picture. Something is wrong with this picture. And this is not how to fix anything. This is not how to solve problems. Ruto's not going to leave State House. I wouldn't. He's going to fight to the death. Ruto campaigned for 9 years. Ruto began campaigning. They came in April 2013. And from 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 9 years of going corner to corner, flying, driving, getting stoned, campaigning, talking to people in markets, in schools, in churches, women groups, youth, etc., pushing wheelbarrows, etc., and spending money. Ruto's, like most Calais, is one of the best fundraisers you could find, just like Tory teacher Arap Moi, the second president. So a guy like that, a tough guy like this, that has gone up against system and whatever all these other things are called, you're going to march and move a guy like that from State House? I mean, are you kidding me? So we have to get real. There's an English saying that says, misery loves company. And this is what has really gelled Raila's supporters to be, united in this kind of grief and mourning. And I saw a lady on one of the TV stations yesterday just being interviewed, and you can tell she is so bitter. I mean, people become bitter with good reason. They just feel so angry and helpless because she was like, we're getting tear gassed, we're getting beaten by the police. But then the strategy is wrong. This is not the way to handle anything. We're trying, first of all, the discussion on consumer prices and cost of living, that's not Raila's discussion. That's our discussion. That's just a pretext. That's the last thing on Raila's mind. The first thing on Raila's mind is how, to be honest, 2022 loss for Raila was extremely embarrassing. Martha Karua, I don't know if she'll ever heal, honestly. Because these guys were propped up by President Uhuru, who was their chairman. Basically, elections was just a perfunctory procedure. It was just a given. Like, we're just going to go to elections, and then we're sworn in. And then the opposite happened. So the fury, the frustration. And I've worked closely with all these people. Huh? I just can't imagine what it's like to continue to be in Raila's camp. The pain, it's excruciating pain. Yes, Raila used to be stronger. Like I said, his better days are behind him. Raila used to be stronger, younger, more virile, you know. His strength is on, just the pity, weaponizing, the narrative as a lure, what lures have been through, how unfair the system has been to him, etc. That's really what the narrative is, and weaponizing that politically for benefit. And then, of course, the riddles, Kitenda Willy, and all of that. But, so that has given him a base that, stays with him more or less. He's chipped away. He's lost quite a bit as well. He's also good at making enemies. So every enemy Raila has today was once a close friend. Even the president was in ODM. Even the former president was in ODM. Kalonzo, who's with him now, used to be his enemy. Mudavadi, who's a key pillar in this government, was Raila's deputy, through all the struggle. Wetangula was his ally. Wetangula decisively delivered Bungoma out of Raila's column into President Ruto's basket. So Raila's got problems. And you don't want to go through this kind of stuff at 80 years old. Spectre was stoned the other day and whatnot. I'm not going to give the favoritism of singling out Spectre or Uhuru's farm, because Uhuru's farm is not a property more special than anybody else's property in Kibra. And Uhuru didn't work as hard as anybody else to acquire what he has. So we're not going to give that kind of favoritism. What the cardinal principle is private property must be respected, that it is not right to raid anybody's property. It can, cascade into many things. But the media must also be fair and balanced in coverage. The allegations are serious, because it's said that it's Uhuru who's also funding this madness, because his family was touched as far as, their tax liabilities and whatnot are concerned. And so these are serious discussions, and these are very distasteful mandamanos. But basically, what I can tell you for sure is, the handshake destroyed Raila. And we really do need some time to talk about that, because, what was the handshake? The handshake destroyed Raila, in my opinion. It actually did. It was political genius on the part of President Uhuru Kenyatta, who's a political scientist and a very sneaky guy. Because what did Raila really get in the handshake? Ask yourself. And he asserted that he won the election, and the court nullified it for him. The Supreme Court. Second nullification in Africa, first in Kenya ever, historic. But what did he get in the handshake? Because the handshake also caused him to lose a lot of credibility. In the handshake regime, when things were going badly, Raila couldn't speak. He couldn't come out and be the people's watchman. So Boniface Mwangi took that small role, or speaking on behalf of Wanjiko. He couldn't say a word. And the best bet for Raila, and it was just entertaining and interesting for me to watch, was I've tried to get power so hard. My last card is just aligning with the president and hoping the president can do something to just ensure I am crowned king. That was Raila's last bet. It was not votes. It was not, the regional mapping for NASA, Azimio, whatever you call it. It was proximity to the king as a last card. And up to the last minute, this card collapsed. Unbelievable. This is the reality of what happened. And it began in 2017. And if I just want to talk historically, the disaster of 2017 began with NASA, which was a huge constellation of leaders, with Mudavadi there, taking time, because this is how Raila does his politics, and pretending, because Raila has a following. He does. We said that at the beginning of the show. He has a following. They took time at the beginning to pretend that they were having a discussion, an in-house discussion, on who should be the flag bearer. Because as I said many times on many TV stations, I believe if NASA had picked somebody else, they would have been victorious. I believe that Raila's problems are beyond the electorate. There's no other explanation. Raila's problems are not the electorate per se. I think his involvement in the 1982 coup ran counter to many issues because a lot of those who are accused in that coup, Senior Private Ochuka and the rest, they were hanged as per law after military tribunal 5 years later. Raila got away. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about military protocol and all of that, but I believe that it is not coincidental that Raila has all this following and every time has to play second fiddle or really nothing. So this is something that he himself, from a strategic standpoint, needed to face reality, take a step back and say, is it Steve that can deliver this penalty? Is it Musalia? Who is it? Because many a times, as you saw in 2002, 21 years ago, how Raila says is kind of how the country goes, because he's the 800-pound gorilla, so to speak. But then he fronted himself. It was a complete disaster. He went into all these, name-calling things with the president. And then ultimately, because of all the instability and pressure from partner, ally countries, settled for a handshake, which was also described as a hand check. Very bad for his credentials, street cred. And that was 2018. So in that handshake then, they, ideally kicked out the DP from his own government. The DP ran as an outsider, cleverly, strategically, and then kind of ran against Jubilee, which now Raila was carrying the Jubilee banner as an incumbent. Just imagine that kind of blunder in strategy, like you're a newcomer in politics. Somebody born in a political family and who's been in elective politics almost all his working life. So this is kind of the disaster that really, really led to this mess.